The stars were dying. Not the ones in the sky, but the ones in Emperor Chorus Voss's eyes. He stood at the tall window of his crystal palace and watched the orange glow on the horizon. 3 colonies had burned in the last month. 3 million of his people had died, and the enemy was coming closer. The Valoran people were beautiful. Their skin was silver like moonlight. Their eyes glowed soft blue in the dark. They had lived in peace for 1,000 years. They had no weapons. They had no soldiers. They had forgotten how to fight. And now the Dravik were coming to kill them all. Chorus turned away from the window. His daughter Lyra stood behind him. She was young and graceful, with long white hair that floated like silk. She was the most beautiful princess in the galaxy, and she was about to become a sacrifice. "The humans have answered," Chorus said. His voice was tired. "They will help us." Lyra nodded slowly. She had heard the stories about humans. Everyone in the galaxy had heard them. They were small creatures from a small planet, but they were dangerous. They fought each other for fun. They built weapons for pleasure. They had turned violence into an art form. The galaxy called them many names. The Mad Ones, the Death Dancers, the species that refused to die. "What do they want in return?" Lyra asked. Chorus could not look at his daughter. "A marriage. A political bond between our peoples. They want you to marry one of their officers." The words hung in the air like poison. Lyra felt her heart grow cold. She had dreamed of love since she was a child. She had dreamed of finding someone who would hold her gently and whisper sweet words in her ear. Instead, she would be given to a barbarian from a violent world. "I understand," she said quietly. Chorus finally looked at her. Tears ran down his silver cheeks. "I am sorry, my daughter. I am so sorry. But our people will die without their help. The Dravik will not stop. They will burn everything we have built. Everything we are." Lyra walked to her father and took his hands. "I know, Father. I will do this. For our people. For you." 2 weeks later, Lyra stood aboard a human warship called the Resolute Dawn. It was nothing like the elegant vessels of her homeworld. The walls were gray metal. The floors were cold. The air smelled like oil and sweat. Everywhere she looked, she saw weapons. The humans stared at her as she walked through the corridors. They whispered to each other. Some looked curious. Others looked suspicious. None of them smiled. A woman in a black uniform led her to a large room. "The captain will see you now," the woman said. Lyra stepped inside. The room was simple. A desk, some chairs, a window showing the endless stars. And standing by that window was the man she would marry. Captain Daniel Hayes turned around, and Lyra felt her breath catch in her throat. He was not what she expected. He was tall and broad, with dark hair cut short and eyes the color of storm clouds. His face was hard and lined with scars. One scar ran from his eyebrow to his jaw. Another crossed his throat. He looked like a man who had walked through fire and refused to burn. "Princess Lyra," he said. His voice was deep and rough. "I am Captain Daniel Hayes." Lyra bowed her head slightly. "Captain, thank you for meeting me." Daniel did not bow. He did not smile. He simply looked at her with those gray eyes, studying her like she was a puzzle he needed to solve. "I want to be clear," he said. "This marriage is a mission. Nothing more. I will protect you because that is my duty. I will fight for your people because that is the agreement. But do not expect love. Do not expect warmth. I am a soldier. That is all I know how to be." Lyra felt a flash of anger. She had given up her dreams for this alliance. She had agreed to marry a stranger to save her world. And this man could not even pretend to be kind. "I did not come here looking for love," she said, her voice colder than she intended. I came here to save my people. If you can do that, then we have nothing else to discuss. Something flickered in Daniel's eyes. Surprise, perhaps. Or respect. He nodded once. Good. Then we understand each other. The wedding happened that evening in the ship's main hall. There were no flowers, no music, no celebration. Just two people standing before a human admiral named Grace Walker, speaking words that meant nothing to either of them. Do you take this woman to be your wife? I do. Do you take this man to be your husband? I do. And just like that, Lyra became the wife of a human soldier. She wore a simple white dress that the humans had given her. Daniel wore his military uniform. They did not hold hands. They did not kiss. When the ceremony ended, they simply walked away in different directions. That night, Lyra sat alone in her small room. She looked out the window at the stars and thought about her home. She thought about the gardens where she used to walk with her mother. She thought about the songs her people sang during festivals. She thought about everything she had left behind. A single tear rolled down her silver cheek. Far across the galaxy, the Dradek fleet was moving. Thousands of ships filled with soldiers who knew only destruction. They had conquered 100 worlds. They had killed billions of beings. And now they were coming for the Valoran Empire. They did not know that the Valorans had called for help. They did not know that humanity had answered. They did not know that a marriage had been made, a bond had been formed, and a war was about to begin. The Dradek thought they were hunting sheep. They did not realize they had woken the wolves. And standing at the center of it all was a princess who had been sold for peace, and a captain who had forgotten how to feel. Neither of them knew it yet, but the galaxy was about to change forever. Not because of fleets or weapons or political agreements, but because two broken people were about to learn something that no one expected. They were about to learn how to save each other. The days on the Resolute Dawn moved slowly. Lyra spent most of her time alone in her room, staring at the metal walls and thinking about home. The ship was always loud. Boots stomped through the corridors at all hours. Alarms rang for drills. Soldiers shouted commands. It was nothing like the quiet peace of Aurelia Prime. She rarely saw Daniel. Her husband came and went like a ghost. He slept in a separate room. He ate his meals with his soldiers. When they passed each other in the hallways, he would nod once and keep walking. That was all. Lyra wondered if he hated her. Or maybe he simply did not care. One morning, a knock came at her door. She opened it to find a young woman with short red hair and a bright smile. She wore the same black uniform as the other soldiers, but her eyes were kind. "Hi there," the woman said. "I am Lieutenant Emma Cole. The captain assigned me to help you. Show you around. Make sure you do not get lost." Lyra looked at her carefully. "He sent you to watch me." Emma laughed. "Maybe a little, but mostly I volunteered. I have always wanted to meet a Valoran. You guys are like legends out here. Beautiful and peaceful and wise." She tilted her head. "Is it true you can glow in the dark?" Despite everything, Lyra smiled. "We do not glow. We just reflect light differently." "Close enough," Emma said with a grin. "Come on, let me show you the ship. This place is not so bad once you know your way around." Over the next few days, Emma became Lyra's guide and friend. She showed her the mess hall where the soldiers ate together, laughing and telling stories. She showed her the training room where men and women practiced fighting with their bare hands. She showed her the observation deck where you could see the stars stretching out forever. "This is my favorite spot," Emma said, sitting on the floor by the big window. "When things get hard, I come here and just watch the universe go by." Lyra sat beside her. "It is beautiful." "Yeah," Emma looked at her. Must be hard for you, huh? Being so far from home, married to a stranger, surrounded by a bunch of loud, sweaty soldiers. Lyra laughed softly. It is not easy. The captain is not a bad guy, you know, Emma said. He is just broken. Lost his whole squad on a moon called Theta 7. 20 soldiers. All his friends. He was the only one who made it out. That kind of thing changes a person. Lyra thought about Daniel's scars. The one on his face. The one on his throat. She wondered how many more he carried on the inside. Why did he agree to marry me? She asked. Emma shrugged. Orders, I guess. And maybe he hoped it would give him something to protect again. Something to fight for. That night, Lyra could not sleep. She walked through the empty corridors until she found herself at the observation deck. The stars burned cold and bright outside the window. She was not alone. Daniel stood in the shadows, staring out at the darkness. He did not turn when she entered, but she knew he had heard her. You should be sleeping, he said. So should you? A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Sleep and I are not friends anymore. Lyra walked closer and stood beside him. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. They just watched the stars together in silence. I watched a combat drill today, Lyra finally said. Your soldiers practice killing like it is a dance. It was terrifying. Daniel nodded slowly. I know how it looks to your people. Violence is ugly. War is hell. We do not fight because we enjoy it. Then why do you fight? He turned to look at her. His gray eyes were heavy with old pain. Because we remember what happens when we do not. Your people chose peace, princess. You built a paradise without weapons, without war. That is beautiful. But my people had our peace taken from us. Again and again. Every time we put down our swords, someone came to burn our homes. So we learned. We learned that the universe is cruel, and the only way to survive is to be stronger than the things trying to kill you. Lyra did not know what to say. She had grown up believing that violence was wrong, that fighting was the way of beasts. But standing here beside this scarred soldier, she began to understand something she had never considered before. Humans did not fight because they were monsters. They fought because they had been hunted. A sudden alarm screamed through the ship. Red lights flashed in the corridors. Daniel's face went hard in an instant. Stay here, he ordered, and then he was running. Lyra watched from the observation deck as chaos erupted outside. Small ships poured out of the resolute dawn like angry bees. The darkness of space lit up with weapons fire. She could see the enemy vessels in the distance, sleek and black, shaped like blades. The Dravik had found them. The battle lasted less than an hour, but it felt like forever. Lyra pressed her hands against the window and watched the human fighters dance through the fire. They moved with impossible speed and precision. They were beautiful in a terrible way. And then she saw it happen. A Dravik ship fired a bright green beam. It struck one of the human fighters directly. The small ship spun out of control, trailing smoke and flame. Lyra's heart stopped. She did not know how, but she knew. She knew it was Daniel. The next hours were a blur. Lyra ran through the ship, searching for answers. She found Emma outside the medical bay, her face pale. He is alive, Emma said quickly. Barely. The blast tore through his cockpit. He almost did not make it. Lyra pushed past her and walked into the medical bay. Daniel lay on a white bed, covered in bandages. Machines beeped around him. His face was pale, but his chest was rising and falling. He was alive. She sat in a chair beside his bed and watched him sleep. She did not know why she was there. He was a stranger. He was her husband in name only. But something inside her had broken when she saw his ship get hit. Something she could not explain. Hours passed. The ship grew quiet. And then Daniel opened his eyes. He looked at her with confusion. "Princess? What are you doing here?" Lyra did not answer right away. She looked at his bandaged body, at the new wounds added to his old scars. This man had flown into battle for her people. He had almost died for a world he had never seen. "I came to thank you," she said softly, "for fighting for us." Daniel stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, something changed in his eyes. The wall he kept around himself cracked just a little. "Get some sleep," he said, his voice rough but gentle. "I will be fine." Lyra nodded and stood to leave. But at the door, she stopped and looked back at him. "I am glad you survived, Captain." And for the first time since they met, Daniel Hayes smiled. It was small. It was tired. But it was real. And in that moment, two strangers took their first step towards something neither of them had expected to find. She married a human for peace, and shined like a star in war. The message came at midnight. Admiral Grace Walker's voice echoed through the ship's speakers, sharp and urgent. All senior officers were to report to the command center immediately. Lyra was in her room when she heard Daniel's boots pound past her door. She followed him without thinking. Something was wrong. She could feel it in the cold air. She could see it in the faces of the soldiers rushing through the corridors. When she reached the command center, the room was filled with grim faces. A holographic map floated in the middle, showing the galaxy in glowing blue light. And there, at the center of Valoran space, a red dot was blinking. Aurelia Prime, her home. Her father. "The Dravik bypassed our front lines," Admiral Walker said. Her voice was calm, but her hands were shaking. "They sent a massive fleet straight to the Valoran homeworld. The attack began 3 hours ago." Lyra felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. She grabbed the wall to keep from falling. Her home, her people, everything she loved was burning. "How bad is it?" Daniel asked. Walker's face told the answer before her words did. "The Valoran Defense Forces are not fighters. They are falling apart. The Dravik are destroying everything. Cities, ships, people. Our estimates suggest they will take the capital within 6 hours. And how far away are we?" Daniel demanded. 12 hours at maximum speed." The room went silent. 12 hours. 6 hours. The math was simple and cruel. By the time the human fleet arrived, Aurelia Prime would be ash. Lyra could not breathe. She thought of her father standing in the Crystal Palace. She thought of the gardens where she played as a child. She thought of the millions of Valorans who had never held a weapon, who did not know how to fight, who would die screaming as the Dravik burned their world. "No," she whispered. Then louder, "No, there has to be something we can do. You are humans. You are supposed to be the greatest warriors in the galaxy. Find a way." Daniel looked at her with pain in his eyes. "Princess, I want to help. But we cannot bend time and space. The fleet cannot get there faster." "Then forget the fleet," a young officer said from the corner. Everyone turned to look at him. His name was Marcus Webb, and he was one of the ship's engineers. "We have an experimental slipstream drive in Storage Bay 7. It was never meant to be used because it is unstable. But in theory, it could get a small ship to Aurelia in 2 hours." Walker shook her head. "That thing is a death trap. It was never tested. There's a 60% chance it explodes the moment you turn it on. 40% chance it works." Daniel said quietly. He turned to look at Lyra. His gray eyes were filled with something she had never seen before. Not duty, not obligation. Something deeper. "I will go," he said. "I will take a strike team. We will reach Aurelia before the capital falls." "That is suicide," Walker said. "Maybe," Daniel agreed. "But if there is any chance to save her people, I have to try. Lyra stepped forward. Her heart was pounding. Her hands were trembling. But her voice was steady. I am coming with you. Daniel's face hardened. Absolutely not. You are the princess. You are the entire reason for this alliance. If you die, everything falls apart. If my people die, there is nothing left to save. Lyra shot back. I will not sit on this ship and watch my world burn. I am coming, and you cannot stop me. They stared at each other. For a long moment, neither moved. Then Daniel let out a long breath. You are the most stubborn person I have ever met. I learned from watching you, Lyra replied. Despite everything, Daniel almost smiled. Fine, but you stay behind me at all times. You do exactly what I say. And if things go wrong, you run. Understood? Lyra nodded. Understood. 2 hours later, a small ship called the Shadowhawk sat in the launch bay. The experimental slipstream drive had been installed in its engine room. 12 soldiers stood ready for the mission. Emma Cole was among them, her red hair tied back and her face determined. Daniel walked down the line, looking at each of his soldiers. You all know the risks. This drive might kill us before we even reach the planet. And if we make it, we will be fighting an army with just 12 people. Anyone who wants to stay behind, I understand. No shame in it. No one moved. No one spoke. They just stared back at their captain with iron in their eyes. Daniel nodded. Then let's go save a world. Lyra climbed aboard the ship and found a seat next to Emma. Her friend gave her a small smile. Scared? Emma asked. Terrified, Lyra admitted. Good. That means you are not crazy. Emma checked her weapon. But you know what? I have seen humans do impossible things when someone they care about is in danger. And that captain of yours? He has not looked at anything the way he looks at you in a long time. Lyra felt her cheeks warm. We are just political partners. Sure you are, Emma said with a grin. The engines roared to life. The ship shook as the slipstream drive powered up. Warning lights flashed everywhere. The air itself seemed to vibrate with dangerous energy. Daniel's voice came over the speakers. Hold on tight. This is going to be rough. The drive activated. For 1 terrible second, everything went white. Lyra felt like her body was being torn apart and put back together. Sound disappeared. Sight disappeared. There was nothing but light and pressure and the feeling of being stretched across infinity. And then it stopped. Lyra gasped for air and opened her eyes. Through the ship's window, she could see a planet burning. Fires dotted the surface like orange wounds. Ships swarmed around it like flies on a corpse. Aurelia Prime. Her home. Daniel appeared beside her. His face was grim. We made it. The drive worked. My planet, Lyra whispered. Tears ran down her silver cheeks. They are destroying everything. Daniel put his hand on her shoulder. It was the first time he had ever touched her with gentleness. Not everything, he said. Not yet. Your father is still in that palace. Your people are still fighting. And we are here now. He turned to face his soldiers. They were already checking their weapons, preparing for battle. Listen up, Daniel said. We are 12 against an army. The odds are impossible. But impossible is what humans do best. We will hit the surface, fight our way to the palace, and rescue the Emperor. And anyone who gets in our way is going to learn why the galaxy fears humanity. The soldiers cheered. Lyra watched them with wonder. These people were walking into certain death. And they were happy about it. Emma appeared beside her and pressed something into her hand. A small energy pistol. Just in case, Emma said. Lyra looked at the weapon. She had never held one before. Her people did not believe in violence. But as she looked out the window at her burning world, something changed inside her. She closed her fingers around the pistol. "All right," Daniel said. "Let's crash a party." The Shadowhawk dove toward the flames. The streets of the capital city were on fire. Buildings that had stood for 1,000 years crumbled into dust. Bodies lay everywhere. Valoran bodies. Silver skin stained with blood. Glowing eyes gone dark forever. Lyra wanted to scream. She wanted to fall to her knees and weep. But Daniel kept moving, and she forced herself to follow. The Shadowhawk had landed in a ruined square near the Crystal Palace. All around them, Dravik soldiers patrolled the streets. They were tall and muscular, with rough gray skin and eyes like burning coals. They carried massive weapons and wore armor stained with Valoran blood. Daniel led his team through the shadows, moving from cover to cover. They were ghosts in the night, silent, deadly. Every time a Dravik soldier got too close, a human would appear from the darkness and end them without a sound. Lyra stayed close to Emma. Her heart pounded in her chest. Her hands shook around the pistol she had never fired. She was not a warrior. She was a princess who had grown up in gardens and ballrooms. But she was here now, in the heart of hell, because she refused to let her people die alone. They reached the outer wall of the Crystal Palace. Daniel held up his fist, and everyone stopped. "Intel says the Emperor is being held in the throne room," Daniel whispered. "The Dravik commander, General Vorn, is going to execute him at dawn. That gives us about 2 hours. How many enemies inside?" Emma asked. "At least 100. Maybe more." One of the soldiers laughed quietly. "So normal odds for us." Daniel did not smile. "We split into 2 groups. Alpha Team takes the front. Draw their attention. Make noise. Make them think the whole human army has arrived. Bravo Team goes through the underground tunnels and reaches the throne room. Get the Emperor out." "Which team am I on?" Lyra asked. Daniel looked at her with hard eyes. "You are staying here with 2 guards. This is as far as you go." "No," Lyra said firmly. "My father is in there. I am coming." "Princess, this is not a debate. You are not trained. You will get yourself killed. Or worse, you will get my people killed trying to protect you." The words hit like a slap. Lyra felt her cheeks burn. But before she could respond, the night exploded with light. A Dravik patrol had found them. Green energy beams tore through the darkness. One of Daniel's soldiers fell instantly. A hole burned through his chest. Everyone scattered, returning fire, shouting commands. Lyra ran. She did not know where she was going. She just ran through the smoke and fire, Emma's voice screaming somewhere behind her. She ducked into a ruined building and pressed herself against the wall. Her breath came in gasps. Her whole body shook with terror. And then she heard the footsteps, heavy, slow, getting closer. A Dravik soldier stepped through the doorway. He was massive, nearly 7 feet tall, with arms as thick as tree trunks. His burning eyes locked onto Lyra, and he smiled a terrible smile. "A Valoran princess," he growled. "General Vorn will be pleased." He raised his weapon. Lyra raised hers. But she could not fire. Her finger would not move. 1,000 years of peaceful culture screamed in her blood. Violence is wrong. Taking a life is the greatest sin. You are not a killer. You are not a monster. The Dravik laughed. Pathetic. He fired. But Lyra was not standing there anymore. Daniel had appeared from nowhere, shoving her aside and taking the blast to his shoulder. He cried out in pain and crashed to the ground. The Dravik aimed again. And something inside Lyra broke. Not into weakness. Into fire. She remembered the old stories. The ones her grandmother had told her as a child. Stories from before the peace. Stories of what the Valorans used to be. Her people could absorb energy. It was a gift they had used for healing for 1,000 years. But once, long ago, they had used it for something else. War. Lyra looked around her. Fire burned everywhere. Energy weapons flashed in the darkness. The whole city was filled with power. Power that was waiting to be taken. She closed her eyes and reached out. The energy came to her like water rushing to the sea. She felt the heat of the flames enter her body. She felt the electricity in the air join her blood. She felt power like she had never known filling every part of her being. When she opened her eyes, they were no longer soft blue. They were blazing white. The Dravik soldier took a step back. For the first time, fear crossed his face. "What are you doing? What is this?" Lyra did not answer. She simply raised her hand and released everything she had absorbed. A beam of pure light exploded from her palm. It was brighter than any sun, hotter than any star. It struck the Dravik soldier and turned into ash in an instant. The wall behind him disintegrated. The ground cracked and melted. When the light faded, Lyra stood trembling in the center of a crater. Her skin was glowing faintly. Her hair floated around her head like a halo of white fire. Daniel stared at her from the ground, his jaw hanging open. What the hell was that? He breathed. Lyra looked at her hands. They were still shining with absorbed power. She felt strong. She felt alive. She felt like she could tear down mountains. "I do not know," she whispered. "I did not know I could do this." She knelt beside Daniel and pressed her glowing hands to his wounded shoulder. The light poured out of her, but this time it was gentle, warm. The wound began to close. The burned flesh healed. In seconds, he was whole again. Daniel grabbed her hand and pulled himself up. He looked at her with new eyes. Not as a fragile princess. Not as a political burden. But as something else entirely. "Can you do that again?" he asked. Lyra looked toward the Crystal Palace. Inside those walls, her father was waiting to die. Inside those walls, 100 Dravik soldiers thought they had already won. They were wrong. "Yes," she said. "I can." They moved together through the burning streets. Daniel and the surviving soldiers fought with guns and blades. But Lyra fought with starlight. Every time an enemy appeared, she absorbed the energy around her and released it in blinding waves. Dravik soldiers fell like leaves in a storm. The Valorans watching from their hiding places saw their princess walking through fire. They saw her glowing like a goddess of war. And for the first time in 1,000 years, they remembered what their people used to be. When Lyra reached the throne room, General Vorm was waiting. He was the largest Dravik she had ever seen, covered in battle scars and medals. Her father knelt before him in chains, bloody and broken. "Ah, the princess," Vorm said. "I heard you were coming. Some of my soldiers spoke of a Valoran who burned like a star. I did not believe them." Lyra stepped forward. The light in her body grew brighter. "Let my father go." Vorm laughed. "Oh, what? You will kill me? You are a Valoran. Your people cannot fight. Your people cannot kill." "My people could not fight," Lyra said. "But I learned from humans." She attacked. The battle was short but brutal. Vorn was strong and fast. But Lyra was filled with the power of a dying city. Every blow he threw, she absorbed. Every weapon he fired, she caught and threw back. And when she finally placed her burning hands on his chest, she released everything she had. General Vorn did not even have time to scream. When it was over, Lyra fell to her knees. The glow faded from her body. She was exhausted, empty, barely able to move. But her father was alive. Her people were safe. And outside, the sound of human engines filled the sky. The fleet had arrived. Daniel knelt beside her and wrapped his arm around her shoulders. "You did it," he said softly. "You saved them all." Lyra leaned against him, too tired to speak. But she was smiling. For the first time in her life, she understood the truth. Peace was not weakness, and war did not make someone a monster. Sometimes, the brightest stars are the ones that burn through the darkness to protect the ones they love. The human fleet filled the sky like a storm made of steel. Hundreds of warships descended through the clouds of Aurelia Prime, their weapons lighting up the darkness. The Dravik invaders, already shaken by the death of General Vorn, tried to fight back. But humans did not come to negotiate. Humans came to win. Lyra watched the battle from the steps of the Crystal Palace. She was wrapped in a blanket, her body still weak from the power she had used. But her eyes were bright as she watched ship after ship explode in the night sky. The Dravik fleet was breaking apart. Some vessels tried to run. The humans did not let them. Daniel stood beside her, his arm in a sling from a wound he had taken during the fighting. He watched the sky with the same grim focus he always had. But when Lyra looked at him, she saw something different in his face. Something softer. "Your people fight like demons," she said quietly. "We fight for the people we love," Daniel replied. "That is the only way we know." By dawn, it was over. The Dravik fleet was destroyed. Their ground forces were either dead or captured. Aurelia Prime was battered and burned, but it was still standing. The Valoran people had survived. Emperor Koris Voss was carried out of the palace on a stretcher. He was badly hurt. The Dravik had tortured him for information. But when he saw his daughter standing in the morning light, he smiled through his tears. "Lyra," he whispered. "My beautiful daughter. They told me you came. They told me you fought." Lyra knelt beside him and took his hand. "I had to, father. I could not let you die." Koris looked at Daniel, who stood a few steps behind. The human captain looked tired and battered, but he stood straight and proud. "You are the one who brought her here," Koris said. "You are the one who risked everything to save my world." Daniel shook his head. "Your daughter saved your world. I just helped." Koris smiled weakly. "Then I chose the right husband for her." Lyra felt her cheeks warm. She glanced at Daniel and saw that he was looking at her with soft eyes. Something had changed between them. The wall that had separated them since their first meeting was gone now. In its place was something new. Something real. Over the next few weeks, Aurelia Prime began to heal. Human engineers worked alongside Valoran builders to repair the damaged cities. Human doctors helped care for the wounded. The two species, once strangers, became partners, friends, family. Admiral Grace Walker came down from orbit to see the progress herself. She walked through the streets of the capital, nodding with approval at the reconstruction efforts. When she reached the palace, she asked to speak with Lyra privately. "I have something for you," Walker said. She pulled a small medal from her pocket. It was shaped like a star, made of silver metal that caught the light. "This is the Medal of Valor," Walker explained. "It is the highest honor a human soldier can receive. It has never been given to someone from another species. But after what you did here, I could not imagine giving it to anyone else." Lyra took the medal in her hands. It was small and simple, but it meant more to her than any crown or jewel. "Thank you," she said. "But I was only able to fight because your people taught me how." Walker smiled. "That is what makes you special, Princess. You learned. You grew. Most people spend their whole lives being what they were born to be. You became something new." That evening, a celebration was held in the Great Hall of the Crystal Palace. Valoran music played for the first time since the invasion. Humans and Valorans danced together, laughed together, ate together. For one night, the pain of war was forgotten. Lyra stood on the balcony overlooking the city. The fires were gone now. Lights twinkled in the windows of rebuilt homes. Her people were alive. Her world was at peace. Daniel walked up beside her. He was wearing a clean uniform for the first time in weeks. His hair was combed. His face was shaved. He almost looked like a different person. "You clean up well," Lyra said with a small smile. "Do not get used to it," he replied. "I will be back to looking like a mess by morning." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the stars appear one by one in the evening sky. "When we first met," Daniel said slowly, "I told you this marriage was just a mission. Nothing more." "I remember," Lyra said. "I was wrong." He turned to face her. His gray eyes were warm now, gentle. "I did not marry you for peace. Not anymore. I would marry you again tomorrow, just because of who you are." Lyra felt her heart flutter. "And who am I?" "You are the bravest person I have ever met. You walked into a war zone with no training. You learned to fight in hours. You saved your father, your people, and probably me too." He reached out and took her hand. "You are Lyra Voss, and I am lucky to call you my wife." Lyra squeezed his hand. Tears of joy ran down her silver cheeks. "I did not save my people because of duty, Daniel. I saved them because you taught me something important." "What is that?" "That love is worth fighting for." She stepped closer and pressed her lips to his. It was their first real kiss. Not a kiss of ceremony or politics. A kiss of love. Of two people who had found each other in the darkness and refused to let go. When they finally pulled apart, Daniel was smiling. A real smile. The kind she had never seen on his face before. "So what happens now?" he asked. Lyra looked out at the stars. "Now we show the galaxy what happens when humans and Valorans stand together." 1 month later, a message was broadcast across every system in the galaxy. Every planet, every station, every ship received the same transmission. Princess Lyra Voss stood before the camera, dressed in a gown of white and silver. Beside her stood Captain Daniel Hayes in his dress uniform. Behind them, the flags of Earth and Aurelia Prime hung side by side. "People of the galaxy," Lyra began, "I was born a princess of a peaceful world. I never held a weapon. I never raised my hand in anger. I believed that violence was evil. That war was the greatest shame." She paused and looked at Daniel. He gave her a small nod. "I was wrong," she continued. "Violence without purpose is evil. But violence in defense of love is the most noble thing in the universe. Humanity taught me that. They taught me that the strongest warriors are not the ones who fight for power. They are the ones who fight for family, for friends, for people they have never met but refuse to let suffer." She turned back to the camera, and her eyes began to glow with soft white light. "We were told that peace and war cannot exist together. That one must destroy the other. But I have learned the truth. Peace is not the absence of conflict. It is the presence of those willing to fight for it. And humanity taught me how to shine." The broadcast ended, but its message spread across the stars like wildfire. In the months that followed, the Valoran-Human alliance grew stronger. Other species came to join them. The weak, the hunted, the ones who had lost hope. They came because they had heard the story of the princess who married a human for peace and became a star in war. Lyra trained a new generation of Valoran warriors. She taught them the ancient arts their ancestors had abandoned. She taught them that strength and compassion were not enemies. She taught them to shine. Daniel served as her co-commander, always by her side. He trained soldiers. He planned strategies. He loved his wife with every beat of his heart. And when the Dravik Collective, broken and humiliated, finally sent a request for peace negotiations, the galaxy held its breath. Humanity could have sent an admiral. They could have sent a politician. Instead, they sent their greatest warrior. They sent Lyra. The woman who had been sold for peace now sat at the head of the negotiating table. The Dravik leaders looked at her with fear in their eyes. They remembered what she had done to their general. They remembered the light that had burned through their army. You wanted war, Lyra said calmly. You found it. Now you want peace. You will have it, but not on your terms. On ours. The negotiations lasted 3 days. When they ended, the Dravik had surrendered completely. They agreed to disarm. They agreed to pay for the damage they had caused. They agreed to never attack another peaceful world. On the final day, the Dravik ambassador asked Lyra a question. How did you become this? He asked. You were born to a peaceful species. How did you become something so dangerous? Lyra smiled. I married a human. She stood and walked out of the room, leaving the ambassador in stunned silence. Outside, Daniel was waiting with the Shadowhawk. Emma stood nearby, grinning. How did it go? Daniel asked. They surrendered everything, Lyra said. The war is over. Daniel wrapped his arms around her and held her close. Then let us go home. Lyra looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, her planet was waiting. Her people were thriving. Her father was healing.